All right, let's get right into it. English grammar. Yeah, it can feel a little tricky sometimes, can't it? But today, we're going to totally demystify one of the most common parts, how to actually spell verbs in the simple past tense.
Have you ever stopped and thought about that? I mean, it's a great question. They both end with the letter Y, right? But their past tense forms look completely different. It feels kind of random, but I promise you there's a super simple logic behind it all. And by the end of this, you are going to have it all figured out.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics, the ED foundation. Then, we'll look at a really easy shortcut for verbs that end in E. After that, we'll solve that Y puzzle once and for all, and then figure out when you need to double up on consonants. By the end, you'll have a whole toolkit to get this right every single time.
Okay, let's start from the ground up, with the most basic, most common rule of them all. This is the one you're going to be using 90% of the time.
You know, it really is that straightforward. For the huge majority of regular verbs in English, making them past tense is as simple as slapping ed on the end. Just think of this as your default setting. And you can see just how easy this is. The verb brush becomes brushed. Open becomes opened. So you might say, I brushed my teeth this morning. It's clean, simple, and honestly super easy to remember. Okay, let's move on to our next rule. And this is really just a small logical shortcut on that first one. It's all about making things just a little more efficient. So think about it. Why would you add another E when one's already sitting right there at the end of the verb? Well, you don't have to. English takes a little shortcut here. If your verb already ends in E, you just pop a D on the end. That's it. Check out these examples. Shave becomes shaved, and like becomes liked. You know, like I liked to play basketball when I was in high school. See? Just add the D and you're all set. And now, the rule that often trips people up. Verbs that end in Y. But it's not some big mystery. It's really just a puzzle with a very clear solution. And the secret, it all comes down to the one little letter that comes right before that final Y. Okay, so this is the crucial part, laid out right here. Let's look at the left column. If a vowel, A, E, I, O, U, comes before the Y, like in the word play, you just add ed like normal. Easy. But now look at the right side. If a consonant comes before the Y, like in study or cry, you got to do two things. First, change that Y to an I, and then add ed. So study becomes studied, and cry becomes cried. And that, my friends, is the entire secret to solving the Y puzzle. All right, on to our final spelling challenge. When in the world do we double that last letter before adding ed? Well, once again, there's a clear pattern to follow. It's often called the CVC rule. Now, this might sound a little technical, but the idea is actually super simple. If you've got a short, one-syllable verb and it ends with the pattern of a single consonant, then a single vowel, then a single consonant, that's when you double that final consonant.
Let's see it in action. The verb nod, N-O-D, that follows the consonant-vowel-consonant pattern, so it becomes nodded. Same thing with stop. It becomes stopped with a double P. For example, the car stopped at the red traffic light.
So this CVC rule gets a little more interesting when we look at verbs with two syllables. It's not just about the letters you see, it's also about the sound. You only double that final consonant if the final syllable of the verb is the one that's stressed, the one you emphasize when you say it out loud.
And this is where it gets really fascinating, actually. Take the verb travel. In American English, we put the stress on the first syllable, travel. Since the stress isn't at the end, you just add ed to get traveled with one L. But in British English, they often stress the final syllable, so they follow the rule and double that L, spelling it traveled. It's the exact same verb, but the spelling literally changes based on how you say it. How cool is that? Okay, we've covered all the main rules. So let's pull everything together into a quick, handy toolkit that you can use anytime you're writing. So here's the bottom line. For most verbs, just add ed or d if it already ends in e. For those verbs ending in y, always check the letter right before it. And for doubling consonants, look for that CVC pattern and listen for where the stress is, especially if you want to get those American and British English differences right.
And there you have it. The spelling rules for the simple past completely demystified. See? It's all about just recognizing these few simple patterns. So now that you have this toolkit in hand, what part of the big English language puzzle are you ready to solve next?
Thank you for watching. Suscríbete a English Zone. Aprende con un tutor visitando school.englishzonegt.org.